abortion at least 50 million times. Good morning. My name is Avery, and my capstone is about abortion. Abortion. Is it right or wrong? Why is it so hotly debated? Some believe that it is murdering an innocent human being. Others believe that it is a basic human right and women should be able to choose over what they do with their own bodies. Ultimately, the argument centers around whether or not the baby growing inside of the mother is alive or not. In these two pictures, there are two fetuses approximately 7 to 8 weeks old. One of these babies is alive and the other is not. Although it is difficult to tell in the pictures which one is which, the one on the left was an unplanned pregnancy and the mother did not want to keep the baby, so it is not alive. The one on the right was a couple had been trying to get pregnant for 6 months and they were extremely excited to hear their baby on an ultrasound for the very first time. So this one must be the one that's alive, right? Ultimately, there's no difference between the two. I believe that both are alive, and the circumstances that the pregnancy did not change the fact, and that abortion is killing another human being in all instances. Abortion is defined by the medical community as a medically induced premature death of a preborn baby in the womb. Another definition is the voluntary termination of a pregnancy resulting in the death of a fetus or embryo. Even the definitions themselves acknowledge that this is a life and an action is required in order to kill that life. That sounds suspiciously like murder to me. So when does life begin? Some say it begins when a heartbeat can be detected. Other arguments say that it begins at viability, which is 23 to 24 weeks. And some say that it doesn't even begin until the birth of the child. But the logical and even scientific conclusion is that life begins at conception. If the life begins when a heartbeat is detected, that would imply that only begins when science and technology can prove it. If life begins at viability, then that would imply that life begins at the only stage where science and technology can help it survive out of its mother's womb. Both of these arguments create a world where the beginning of life fluctuates based upon the world's ability to detect and sustain life outside the mother's body. Does that mean that the world was not spherical until Magellan proved it, or that gravity didn't exist until Newton discovered it? As humans, we believe that we've discovered everything there is to discover, and if we haven't discovered it, then it must not exist. Even the courts acknowledge that a baby is a human life prior to birth. If it were not alive, then there would be no need to perform an emergency C-section for the baby in distress or the mother in the labor. The law of biogenesis states that every species reproduces its own kind. Additionally, personhood is defined by membership in human species, not by the stage of development within that species. The terms embryo and fetus do not refer to non-humans, but rather different stages of development for humans. A 2-year-old child cannot survive on its own without food or shelter. It cannot protect itself, and it cannot survive and it's dependent on others in order to survive. But that doesn't make it a non-human, and that doesn't make it a non-life. Therefore, a conception by 2 humans produces another human person. Whether or not it is still dependent on the mother to continue to develop, it is a human life at conception. So when is it justifiable to take another's life? Capital punishment is a legal way of ending life. It is a sentence given to the most awful of crimes. What crime has the baby committed? Will it interrupt a mother's education or career goals? Maybe it will bring shame or embarrassment to the family. Maybe it will not have a father involved in its life. Even yet, maybe it will be born with a debilitating disease that will bring suffering and pain to the child's life. Maybe Hitler was right. Any group of humans, born or unborn, should be exterminated when their existence gets in the way of someone's agenda or personal value system. part of this debate is whether one believes God is the author of life or not. Ultimately, the creator of life should be the one who decides when life begins and the only one who should decide when life should end. Psalm 139. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full and well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book when they came to be. Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, I consecrated you. I appoint you a prophet to the nations. Luke 1:41. And when Elizabeth heard the greeting of Mary, the baby leaped in her womb. These verses show evidence that even before we were a cell in the womb, God knew us and had a plan for us. What gives us the right to destroy a piece of God's plan? In 2013, a little more than 1 million abortions were performed in the United States alone. This only includes those that were reported. Some speculate with reason that it is much more than that. That translates to approximately 3,000 to 4,000 abortions every single day. In the same year, there were nearly 4 million live births. That means at least 20% of all pregnancies are ended with abortion. Some of the reasons why women have abortion are they interfere with a woman's education, work, or ability to care for a dependent. They could not afford a baby right now. They have relationship problems, or they do not want to be a single mother. And all of these ways combined are less than 1% that cite rape, incest, and protection of the mother's life. The many ways to perform an abortion are non-surgical. Performed up to 9 weeks of the pregnancy, the mother takes a series of pills that first distributes the nourishment and blood supply to the baby, and then causes the uterus to contract in hopes of expelling the dead baby. This method can oftentimes be incomplete, usually is extremely painful, and can be very prolonged. The process is very similar to a miscarriage. Suction aspiration. This is most commonly used method in the first trimester, where opening uterus is stretched open and the baby is sucked through a powerful vacuum 80 times the strength of a normal household vacuum. Dilation and curettage, or DNC. Again, the cervix is stretched and open or dilated with a sharp instrument is used, curettage, to tear the baby away from the walls of the uterus. Oftentimes, both curettage and suction are used in combination to ensure that the procedure was completed and that no remaining pieces of the baby are left inside the uterus. Dilation and evacuation, or D&E. Similar method to DNC, used after 12 to 14 weeks when the baby's bones have started to calcify. This method, however, requires that the baby be dismembered and the skull crushed in order to remove all of the parts of the baby, since they are too big and too rigid to fit through the opening. Saline injection. Typically used in the second late trimester, a needle is introduced into the sac surrounding the baby, and a toxic salt infusion is injected into the cavity that eventually stops the heart from beating. The abortion is completed either by D&E or the mother then has induced labor in order to deliver her dead baby. All of these methods involve either depriving the baby of its source of life, dismembering it from its environment, or poisoning it and forcing it out of the body. Again, sounds suspiciously like murder to me. The common medical risks of abortion are bleeding, infection, need to repeat the procedure, damage to the uterus, affecting future fertility and future pregnancies, and cost. Other risks of abortion include the following: emotional stress, depression, anxiety, insomnia, relationship strains with friends, family, and their significant others, feelings of guilt, isolation, and shame. There is an overwhelming evidence that women who have had abortion have regret, and that the passing of time does not alleviate their regret. They believed that an abortion would make life go back to the way it was before they were pregnant. Oftentimes, it does for everyone else in her life, but it does not erase the fact that she was pregnant with her baby. In conclusion, abortion is a polarizing topic of debate. Very few other issues have divided this country more than the right to life or the right to choose. At the root of this debate is whether or not God is the authority and creator of life. But the killing of a human life, a life that I believe begins at conception, and although there are many arguments and circumstances to try to justify it, the premeditated killing of a human life by another is murder, whether it has been made legal or not. As we continue to align ourselves with the sides of right to life or right to choose, we continue to murder 1 million babies every year who will never have the chance to life or to choose. Finally, I will leave you with this short video, and then you can decide which side you choose.
Would you affirm the statement that all abortions should be forbidden at all times, in all cases, for all reasons, or do you think that there are room for some case-by-case exceptions?
I don't think there's any way we can justify abortion.
Okay. Let me ask about a couple of possible cases that I think I would at least ask you to consider. In the case of an ectopic pregnancy, when an egg has been fertilized but does not settle an implant in the uterus, but rather in the fallopian tubes, that is not a viable position for an embryo to mature, grow, and be born, nor, as much as I understand it, can it be transplanted from there into the uterus. In such a condition, baby would grow and die inside the mother, but would also cause death to the mother as well. In such a circumstance where there is absolutely no medical reason to hope for an outcome other than the death of the mother and the child, but the death of the child would save the life of the mother, do you think that in that condition, on a case-by-case basis, there may be room to remove an embryo that has settled inside something other than the mother's uterus?
Well, first of all, that's not an abortion. That's actually a miscarriage because there's no way the baby will survive it anyways. So I do believe you should take it out because there's really no way it will survive otherwise.
Okay. What are the moral obligations on a mother who may be in need of receiving some kind of medical treatment for herself that may prove harmful or fatal to an unborn child? For example, I imagine chemotherapy would have devastating results on a pregnant mother, on the child inside of her. What moral obligation would a mother have to maybe decline life-saving medical treatment so that it not harm her child? Or does a mother have a freedom, a moral freedom, to choose to receive chemotherapy even though it may hurt her child?
I didn't research exactly what doctors would do, but I believe that if the mother did not want an abortion in the first place, she would try to hold off as long as she could so they could get the baby out, so there was a possibility that they could save the baby and then also get chemotherapy. I believe that the mother would do whatever she could to keep her baby alive if she did not want it dead in the first place, that she would even be willing to give up her own life to save her baby, and trust that there will be people to take care of her baby.
Let's see. At one point earlier, you made the conclusion that life should begin at conception rather than viability. What drew you to that conclusion? How did you make that decision as opposed to life beginning at the heartbeat or viability outside the mother? Why conception?
Well, first of all, there are many scriptural proof with that. And also, who knows, 60 years from now, we could have better technology that could figure out more, just because we can hear the heartbeat now. 60 years ago, we weren't even able to hear the heartbeat, so we had no way to figure out that the baby even had a heartbeat in the first place. But I believe that life begins at conception, and there should be no way to just life begins at conception.
Avery, now you've studied this, and let's say you have a college roommate someday that, as you all become friends, you find out that she's had an abortion. How do you think you would go about kind of ministering to her in a different way, maybe now that you've kind of done a big study on it?
Yeah. I know that abortion is a type of trauma, and it hurts the women in so many ways. And I believe the woman would definitely feel some kind of emotional pain. So I would not be like, oh, that's bad, and make her feel even worse than she probably already does, because she probably feels very bad about that. And just tell her how no matter what she decided, that I still love her and I'm not discriminating her for that choice, and that God still loves her. And but I believe that she will be in a horrible state, probably. So I would do whatever I could to just love her in every way I could.
Okay, so try to tell you a little bit. So what would you say, or a lot of people who are for abortion, this is one of their arguments, in that if abortion were made illegal, we would see an increase in the number of illegal or underground abortions, which could lead to an increase in the death of the mother and the fetus just because it wasn't carried out properly. What would you say to that argument?
Well, first of all, there are still back alley and coat hanger abortions now because it costs so much anyways, and most of the women who get abortions are under the poverty line and they aren't able to afford abortions in the first place, so they look to that as their second way of doing that. I mean, pretty much we live in a sinful world, and there's no way to stop our human nature from getting what we want and not caring about what is right and what we should that helps other people and not just ourselves. So the fact that we all live in a sinful world, there's really nothing you can do about that because people will do what they want.